Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of Grizzlies Live, as we have the 22nd annual Martin Luther King Jr. Day celebration game at FedEx Forum. Before that, we have the Earl Lloyd Sports Legacy Symposium, the 19th annual Sports Legacy Awards, handed out to some special honorees today here at FedEx Forum. Welcome, everyone, inside FedEx Forum. I'm Rob Fisher, Reverend Knight alongside. We got Grizzlies Live coming your way at 4:30. We got the Symposium coming your way in moments. Always look forward to this day. Always look forward to the Symposium.
Well, I'm excited. The game, yeah, okay, I'm ready for the game. But I'm really excited to hear these stories and hear people's backgrounds for these nominees and how Dr. King has influenced their lives. I know they had an opportunity to go through the Civil Rights Museum, so I also like to hear how that impacted them on that journey.
Absolutely. We'll hear from Renee Montgomery, Ozzie Smith, the Baseball Hall of Famer, Calvin Hill, Pro Bowl running back, Alex English, NBA Hall of Famer. We'll hear all of their stories today and hear what they're doing in their communities and trying to pass on the legacy of Dr. King. And for more and for the Symposium, let's head across the hall here to Pete Pranica, your television voice of the Memphis Grizzlies, as he hosts the event for you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 22nd annual Earl Lloyd Sports Legacy Symposium presented by the Hyde Family Foundation. I'm Grizzlies television voice Pete Pranica. I will be the symposium moderator today once again. I'd like to thank those of you who were able to brave the elements and be with us today. I'd also like to welcome in our regional sports network audience looking in on Bally Sports Southeast. Through this symposium and the National Civil Rights Museum Sports Legacy Award, we recognize our honorees' dedication and their significant contributions in the spirit of Dr. King to civil and to human rights, the social justice movement, and for laying the foundation for future leaders through their careers in sports. We're proud once again to partner with the National Civil Rights Museum to host not only this afternoon's symposium, but a series of events this past week and holiday weekend that give a platform to a critical dialogue that not only honors Dr. King's legacy, but continues his life's work yet to be fulfilled. Now, please welcome to the podium the president of the Memphis Grizzlies and FedEx Forum, Jason Wexler.
Thanks, Pete, and good afternoon to both our audience here at the Built Ford Tough practice facility, as well as to those viewing on Bally Sports Southeast. I want to thank the Hyde Family Foundation for their continued support for the Earl Lloyd Sports Legacy Symposium. I also want to thank this year's honorees for taking the time to join us here in Memphis, especially under these weather conditions. It's by recognizing each of their impact beyond the court and field that we're able to reflect on the intersection of sports and the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This is the 22nd season of our annual tradition of honoring Dr. King's legacy. It is a point of pride for our entire organization as we work to bring awareness to and support for the ongoing movement for social and economic justice. It is our hope that the conversations facilitated over the course of this weekend stay with each of us and allow for reflection on the progress that has been made, but also highlights how much remains to be accomplished. It is now my pleasure to introduce the president of the National Civil Rights Museum, Dr. Russ Wigginton. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you, Memphis Grizzlies, for all your support. We are honored at the National Civil Rights Museum to be in partnership with the Memphis Grizzlies on this very important day. Today is Dr. Martin Luther King's 95th birthday, and in Memphis, we celebrate Dr. King every day. It is important that our society recognize his passion, his conviction, and the spirit by which he worked so tirelessly to help our country reach its full potential through the lens of civil and human rights, through the lens of nonviolence, and through the lens of love. Sports is a terrific venue by which we celebrate each other's gifts and talents, and we work in unity for a better tomorrow. Thank you, Memphis Grizzlies. Thank you all for supporting the National Civil Rights Museum. And let's reach our full potential the way Dr. King aspired. Thank you.
Thank you, Russ. The National Civil Rights Museum is a true gem in the United States. It is a place where Every NBA team, when they come to visit Memphis, they make sure to go there. And when somebody joins the Grizzlies organization, one of the first things they do is they go to the National Civil Rights Museum. It is an absolutely amazing place and one of the most moving museums anywhere in the world. We're going to step aside for a moment. We'll introduce you to our honorees, and we'll take a break, and then we'll rejoin our audience on Bally Sports Southeast after this timeout. Welcome back to the Earl Lloyd Sports Legacy Symposium presented by the Hyde Family Foundation. It is now my very great pleasure to introduce our Sports Legacy Award honorees. An 8-time NBA All-Star, Alex English was named to the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame after a 15-year career. He is best known for his 11 seasons with the Denver Nuggets, where he helped guide them to 9 consecutive postseason appearances and a trip to the 1985 Western Conference Finals. When English left the Nuggets, he was the holder of many franchise records, including most career points, assists, games, and minutes played while wearing a Nuggets uniform. In addition to his time in Denver, English also played for the Milwaukee Bucks, Indiana Pacers, and Dallas Mavericks. Established in 1989, English's Let's Share Foundation contributes funds to feed, heal, shelter, educate, inspire, enlighten, and nurture people of every age, gender, race, and socioeconomic status. The goal of the Let's Share Foundation is to provide quality of life for all people through the distribution of resources and support for those who may not be able to achieve it themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Alex English.
Thank you.
One of the most influential figures in the history of women's basketball, 2-time WNBA champion Renee Montgomery retired after 11 seasons to advocate for social justice. She was the 4th overall pick in the 2009 WNBA draft after a 4-year career at UConn that was capped with a 39-0 season and a national championship. Montgomery played for the Minnesota Lynx, Connecticut Sun, Seattle Storm, and Atlanta Dream. And following her playing career, Montgomery became a part owner of the Atlanta Dream. The Renee Montgomery Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit foundation established to inspire, cultivate, and empower. The foundation's optimistic philosophy, Moments Equal Momentum, emphasizes the power and positive benefits of using each opportunity to build future successful outcomes.
The RMF addresses the importance of positivity, education, and technology in early youth development that promotes equality in women's sports and advocates for social justice. RMF provides platforms, programs, and resources necessary to encourage growth and develop lifelong skills. Please welcome Renee Montgomery. A native of Baltimore, Maryland, Calvin Hill enjoyed a 12-year career with the Dallas Cowboys, Washington Commanders, and Cleveland Browns. Hill was named to the Pro Bowl team 4 times as a member of the Cowboys and finished his NFL career with over 6,000 rushing yards and 42 rushing touchdowns. He's the father of NBA Hall of Famer Grant Hill, who was part of the 12th Annual National Civil Rights Museum Sports Legacy Award class in 2017. He currently sits on the boards of several organizations and specializes in working with troubled players. As a consultant with the Cleveland Browns, Hill helped form a group of Browns players to control and eliminate drug and alcohol-related problems. He has also written several articles on sports and academia for national publications and works as a motivational speaker addressing the problems of drugs and alcohol and the important relationship of sports and academia. Please welcome Calvin Hill. And widely considered one of the greatest shortstops in Major League Baseball history, Ozzie Smith was named to the Baseball Hall of Fame following a 19-year career with the San Diego Padres and St. Louis Cardinals. Nicknamed the Wizard, Smith is the all-time assist leader at shortstop with over 8,300 assists. He was a 15-time All-Star and a 13-time Rawlings Gold Glove Award winner. The Ozzie Smith IMAC Regeneration Center opened in May of 2017. It established personalized protocols for patients using physical therapy, chiropractic, platelet-rich plasma, spine decompression, and stem cell rejuvenation in pain management and treatment. Additionally, Smith serves as the president of PGA Reach Gateway Foundation, an organization that reaches out to inner-city youth and our military via mentoring and golf programs. Please welcome the Wizard, Ozzie Smith. We are honored to have you here, and we stand in awe of all that you have achieved, not only on the fields of competition, but in the realm of social justice. When doing this symposium, one of the first questions I always want to ask is, when did you become aware of the philosophy of Dr. King? Was it talked about in your household? Did you learn it through school? Just to kind of get a sense of what touched you most about what Dr. King's message was. And I'll throw that out. I want to hear from everybody, but whoever wants to jump in first, feel free.
We'll let the lady go first.
Okay. For me, I was very fortunate because I'm the daughter of 2 HBCU alums. So a lot of storytelling, a lot of history was just told to me on a daily basis. It's not even like they were like, hey, let's sit down and talk. It was just, if they saw something on TV, they would be like, oh, you know that Uncle Nearest is the one that actually started the whiskey, and they would just tell me things. And so then if I'm in the store and I see Uncle Nearest, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I know that name, I know that story. So there was a lot of storytelling that happened at home for me. My Snook, which is my mom, she ended up being a college professor for 30 years at that same HBCU, West Virginia State. So I feel like I knew at a very young age. Like I understood Black excellence very young, and especially being submerged in a state that's 3% non-white. So I had to understand who I was very, very early. And it wasn't a problem, honestly. So I think that, just continuing through my life, a lot of the things that I learned in school or didn't learn in school, I definitely learned at home.
Right, and for you, it was a lot of storytelling because you're younger, you were not contemporaneous with Dr. King, but gentlemen, you were all alive when Dr. King was in the midst of the civil rights struggle. So what do you remember from that time period? And Alex, what stood out to you?
Well, I grew up in South Carolina, so I was very much a part of what was going on during that period. I was a young man, a young boy, and my grandmother was at the head of our house, 13 kids, brothers, sisters, and cousins, and it was important for us to know who our leaders were, and she made sure that she shared with us, what was going on in our country at that time. But it was, I think when he was assassinated was the time that we realized and understood that this was a very important person in our world. And, that's when I took it upon myself to learn more about Dr. King in his life, and shared, I shared it with my brothers, sisters, and cousins, and with my children when they were young and today.
Calvin, what about you?
Well, I'm the oldest person on this panel, so I actually, growing up in the 50s and in the 60s, went through that whole period. And I can remember growing up in Baltimore, although I grew up in an all-black section of Baltimore, everything was segregated. I mean, I went to black schools up until the 8th grade. Every summer, my parents were both from South Carolina, and every summer we would go back, as they called it, going back home. And I'd spend the summer with my cousins and my grandfather in South Carolina. And it was always very interesting because although I lived in a segregated world in Baltimore, I wasn't really necessarily aware of it until we would take the train and stop in Washington. And then in Washington, we'd have to get into a black car. And I didn't realize that because I would always look forward to stopping in Washington because they had an ice cream parlor at Union Station that had different flavors. And my mother and I would always stop and blah, blah, blah. Well, one year I realized when we were getting back on the train, we were getting back on the same train, but we were getting in a different car. And I asked my mother, why didn't we just leave our stuff in the train? And she said, just hush. And so suddenly I became aware of, the manifestations of Jim Crow. And the fact that everything was segregated once we went back below Washington. And you saw that. And, I would ask questions, well, why do they have 2 water fountains? And hush, just hush, don't ask questions. Famously, if you were to talk to my cousins, they still remember me because I guess I'm not even sure how old I was. While they were standing guard, I decided to take a drink out of the white water fountain. And I took a drink, and then we ran around the corner, and they said, well, what did it taste like? I said, I think it tastes the same as our water. And so, you started to think in terms of, this doesn't make a lot of sense to have 2 water fountains with the same water. And as I got older and older, you started to see it. So I was probably, 12, 13 years old when Dr. King really came on the scene. And I can remember my parents, both of whom had grown up in Jim Crow in South Carolina. In fact, they became a part of the Great Migration North in the 30s. And they used to talk about the fact that things were changing and things would change. And there were some minor boycotts in Baltimore. And, young kid that I was, why can't we go into that store? Well, we're not going in that store because they won't serve us. And so, that was a part of my whole maturation. And obviously, when I think of Dr. King, I realize that I'm and my family are the beneficiaries of, his valiant stands, his leadership, the fact that he was a real warrior for what America purports to represent and the ideal of America.
Ozzie, what about you?
Well, I think I'm going to echo pretty much the same, what everybody has said here. We all or became students, I think, at learning the importance of Dr. King, Reverend Abernathy, and Andrew Young. They were all part of my youth and the education, being at home and then getting out into the public. And I think none of us up here would have had the opportunities that we've had without the courage, the determination that Dr. King and everybody that was a part of his congregation, gave us the opportunities that we've had the opportunity to experience. And my mom and father were always stressing the importance of following and making sure that you knew who your leaders were and the things that they stood for.
I think we all are agreed that professional athletes, people that have a platform, have a certain level of responsibility to give back to the community and to be advocates and to be voices. Is that a role that you're all comfortable with?
For me, I mean, it's one of the most important assets that you can have in life is the ability to give back. And I think for all of us that excel and have the opportunity to reach the heights that we have to understand the importance of the importance that we have to young people, the responsibility that we have to young people. And I've never taken that for granted. And I want young people to know and understand that, you know, life can be tough, but you've got to learn to deal with the whatever the situation is and be the very best person that you can be. And if you're working hard to be the very best person that you can be and wanting and learning to do the right thing. And I think that if you work hard at trying to do the right thing, things usually turn out pretty well.
Let's assume that Dr. King came back today. There have been advances. Things have gotten better. We don't have segregation, but we're not where we want to be. If Dr. King came back today, where do you think he would want to focus his efforts on advancing the causes of social and racial justice?
Well, I think he would continue where he left off. You know, we've made advances, but we've also taken steps back. And, you know, it's important to teach young people the histories of all of America. And, you know, there are places now where they want to take away some of the history of how African Americans live in this country. And other folk, not just African Americans. So I think that, you know, we, you know, I kind of echo what Ozzy said. You know, I welcome the, I welcome being able to stand up for what's right. You know, I'm always trying to figure out now what is it about me that other person can't understand and see. You know, we bleed the same blood. We may have been brought up differently, but you know, the physical differences, you take all that away, what is it about me that they can't handle? Why can't they? And I know, I remember Doc Rivers, you know, during the pandemic making a statement about wanting to be loved and understand why can't we get along, and why can't the other side, me and that meaning white folk, not be able to accept him as a human being, or accept us as human beings, because we are. And I think that's what Dr. King stood for, but he also brought out that in other folk, you know, other people. And going through the Civil Rights Museum yesterday, you realize that Dr. King was at the spear, the point of the spear, but there were others that flowed behind him that pushed and pushed the same message, but in a different kind of way. You know, remember James Brown, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. You know, it's all those different, all the different people in our histories that were awesome and great, that wanted the same thing that we want. Just want us to all be able to get along and be accepted as just another human being. And that's the perplexing part. The perplexing thing to me is that why can't it be that simple?
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think that I think he called it the poor man's campaign, you know, was where they didn't want him to get distracted from, and that's how he came to Memphis, and he wanted to work with the sanitation workers. But I think about that campaign because the scariest thing is to unite. So I feel like that's what the main goal was. Like, well, let me show you how much we're the same. So then you can realize that it's very little that we're different. And when you start to talk economics in a sense of the haves and the have-nots, you're going to look, and it used to be like, you used to say the 2%ers of the world. Well, the 2%ers are turning into the 1%ers of the world. So even now, if he came back right now, you would see that the poor man's campaign, you need to pick back up right where you left off, in a sense of it's still, the gap is growing, the gap is getting wider, and and also the growth of your own community. You know, I think I talk about local is the new global a lot, because you have to build around you and you have to build together. And I think that was the main. Love was taught a lot, but unity was taught so much. And so if you just think about like everybody's problems, you throw them all in a bucket. We just like, all right, give me your problems, let's all throw this in a bucket. And we start to look at everybody's bucket, and I look in the bucket, I'm like, oh, I got that problem too. Oh, me too. And you start to just look around, and we are very similar in so many aspects. We all just wanna pretty much take care of your own family. You wanna live a happy life. And so to your point, it could all be so simple, right? But it's just making it happen and understanding that like we all have a common thread. We all have a common thing that we all want. And how do we get to that space?
Calvin, having studied Dr. King, if he were to come back today and look at the world in 2024, where do you think he would focus his attentions on?
Well, you know, to echo the previous speaker, you know, it wasn't about race. It was about, I mean, you call it the poor man's campaign. It was a poor people's campaign. And I remember actually going over to Washington where they were camping out. And, you know, Dr. King realized it was a function of, like you said, the haves and the have-nots. And the question is, why are the have-nots, you know, it's generation after generation after generation. So it was about equal opportunity. And I think if he came back physically, I mean, I feel his presence. And I don't think his spirit is alive. And from a religious standpoint, I believe he's someplace where it is perfect. But be that as it may, I think he would be optimistic. His last speech, he said, you know, I've been to the mountaintop and God has allowed me to see, you know, and so he knew where he was going, and he knew the ultimate destination. He would still be working to get there. You know, you know, I mean, he would be working very hard. He'd get frustrated from a human standpoint. But I think, you know, his goal was, you know, a goal that he could see and he talked about. You know, just to talk about something else that you mentioned, though, you know, you talk about the impact that athletes have. You know, the term, I'm an old guy, so, you know, platform is a new term. We didn't use that when I was playing. But I realized the power of athletes. You know, growing up as a young kid in Baltimore, I had two heroes, Martin Luther King when I became a teenager, but before that was Jackie Robinson. And my father encouraged me to like Jackie Robinson, and he talked about Jackie Robinson. I read somewhere, and I thought I read, that Jackie Robinson used to eat peanuts, shell and all. And so as a young kid, whenever I got a peanut, or, you know, I'd get some peanuts, I would eat the shell and all, because that's the way Jackie Robinson did it. And I think in 1970 or 1971, I met Jackie Robinson. And I happened to mention that to his wife, Rachel, that I ate the peanuts, shell and all. And she said, honey, I don't know where you got, I've heard that before. He didn't eat shell. Well, that just shows you that, you know, young kids will try to emulate the athletes. Yeah. And obviously, you know, when we look at what's happening, you know, with the, you know, the shoe companies, et cetera, they realize the power that athletes have to encourage young people. And so, you know, my point is, you know, to be like Alex English, he's got some God-given talents, and he was given some things. The same thing with Ozzy, the same thing with this young lady. I mean, I can't believe she can shoot a basketball better than I. But, you know, there are some God-given talents, you know, size, speed, quickness, et cetera. And the question is why, you know, is Alex English given 6'8", 6'9", 6'9", the ability to, you know, have an advantage in basketball? God give us all some ability. And I think, you know, the command is that we use that to help other people, to influence other people. That justifies, you know, why does an Alex English, you know, why can he dunk the ball and I can't dunk the ball?
Mm-hmm.
But, we all are given gifts to, and to justify those gifts, there's a reason. God wants us to use whatever we have to make it better for other people. My mother used to say, every smile is started by another smile. So, when you meet somebody, rather than frown, smile at them, even if you don't know them.
Right. We touched on this, poverty, as part of social justice. I think so many times, you talk about social justice and racial equality, or inequality as the case may be, but the civil rights struggle today encompasses so many more things, whether it's poverty or hunger or the rights of the LGBTQ community. What are some of the, beyond race, what are the important elements of social justice in our world in 2024 that really need to be addressed?
Well, I think that, for Dr. King, we mentioned a minute ago about if he came back today, I think Dr. King would realize that the struggle continues. And it's all about equality and giving people the same opportunities. I don't know if, I don't know all of the answers. I don't have all the answers. But getting back to what I said earlier, I think that if you work hard at trying to do the right thing for fellow man, starting with oneself and looking in the mirror and wanting to be the very best that you can be, then, I think that has a lot to do with how you treat your fellow man. And I think that's what Dr. King would continue to work on as far as society is concerned.
I would say probably just the financial crisis. You look at it, and I've read some articles that talk about how the younger generation aren't going to be able to purchase homes. It's just not even going to be an option anymore. It'll be out of the price range. And so just imagine not being able to have a stability, or not being able to own. You think that there's certain things that you do. You go to job, to the workforce, you start making money, then you get your house and you have a family, and there's certain things and milestones that you want to hit as just humans. You want to have stability and be able to take care of yourself. And we're at a point where there's a financial crisis where the gap just grows larger and larger, to where the people at the bottom of it, they're looking at trying to just feed a family now. They're trying to figure out, how can I take care of my own family? So I feel like that's something that needs to be addressed. It's just, that's where there's all kinds of negative effects that happen when you don't have the financial means. That's when you start to see cities and towns like Memphis where there is crime, but you have to look at what is the cause of things. A lot of times we're seeing the effects and we're like, oh yeah, this is terrible. Don't go to that city. This is terrible. But what kind of money is going into it to make it better? You're not going to make it better by just saying it's terrible. You're not going to make it better by just talking about it. And so I even, I sports explain everything because I'm an athlete and this is my life. But it's just like in sports, they talk about women's sports and the growth of women's sports. And it's like, well, how many games are on TV as opposed to men's sports? And how much media is covering women's sports as opposed to men's sports? And then you start to realize, well, maybe that's why there's not these brand deals. Of course, the Super Bowl, people pay $7 million for 30 seconds in the Super Bowl. Why do they do that? Exposure. They want their company, their product to be seen by the millions of people viewing it. So there has to be something to the fact of, well, if they're paying that much of a premium to be seen, then if women's sports aren't on TV and aren't getting seen, what's the negative effect? Because people only talk about the effect of, no one's watching women's sports, which is a lie. We know that. But the narrative started because of, if you can't see it, they don't understand what it is, or there's even sayings where if you can't see it, you can't be it. So I just think the financial crisis, you can say all the problems that there are, but we got to start looking at what's causing those problems. Why do these inner cities have such crime? People are trying to survive. People are trying to figure it out, and maybe if you start to get to the financial cusp of it and what's going on, that's how you can try to fix it.
All of you have been leaders in your post-athletic careers. And Calvin, you mentioned obviously Jackie Robinson being a role model for you. What about the rest of you and your role models, the people that you looked up to, maybe not only for social justice, but just in being active in the community and giving back and working for equality?
Well, personally, I've looked at different people. I think my grandmother, who reared me, was the person that I respected and looked at the most, because in the community, she made sure that the people in our community, if they were less privileged than we were, that she would try and help. And we were very poor, and she would give her, the clothes off of her back to someone who seemed less privileged, and made sure that, the community of us was taking care of each other.
What about you, Ozzy?
I remember back in the day when I think for us up here, it was okay for the neighbor. Mm-hmm. If we went out and did something wrong, it was okay for the neighbor to whip our butt.
That's right.
And keep us in line. And I think it's some of that discipline that is missing today with our youth and stuff. And it gets back to community, and wanting to be a part. I want to be proud of the community in which I live. And if I'm going to be proud of the community in which I live, I got to be a part of what the solution is. And so it's very easy to sit back and say, well, that's a problem over here, there's a problem over there. You got to figure out how you can be part of what the solution is.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because, and I would agree, economics is a part of the problem, but, I grew up in an all, working class neighborhood where nobody was wealthy. You were wealthy if you only had one kid as opposed to 5 kids. And I was an only child, so I got a little bit more than some of my friends. But, as Ozzy said, if Dr. King came back, I think he would be shocked at what is happening in our neighborhoods. And I don't necessarily think it's just a function of money. One of the things I knew we had in our neighborhood was shame. Shame was a powerful force, and it was, there was a right way to do things. And then I knew if I ever left my house, I'd better not do anything that was going to bring shame on my last name. And that was I could be doing something or being someplace I shouldn't be, and Miss So-and-so could see me and say, shame on you. And, the worst thing was for her to say that, even worse for her to tell my mother or my father. And so that was a very powerful force. Most of the people were working, we didn't lock our houses. We had a little screen door. We didn't have air conditioners, so in a hot summer, we just left the windows open. You didn't have to worry about anybody breaking in your house with females. You didn't have to worry about your sister or your daughter, walking down the street and somebody, And so I think Dr. King, if he came back, he would look at a lot of things that have happened. And, obviously a lot of it's about economic opportunity, but also, something is missing in our society that, he would be shocked at. I mean, I was listening to a TV show, a sports show recently, and I was shocked at some of the language. I remember as a young kid, we had 1 or 2 guys who would say dirty words, bad words, but we'd go around the corner and he'd say them, and but we said, "Oh, you better not let your mama hear it." I mean, so there was an order about things, and we need to get back to that. I played for Tom Landry, and Tom Landry did a lot of very technical stuff. I mean, we were very sophisticated in our offense, lots of shifting and motion. I mean, I watched Miami the other day, and they do a lot of that, and different formations. But, from time to time, a lot of that stuff wouldn't work. And we'd have to get back to basics. And I think Dr. King might come back and say, hey, we got to get back to some of the basic things, not just in the black community, but in society, where, even when we were apart, we had shame, and people were civil towards one another. And we saw that, and we looked at people, as our brother and us. We don't have that now.
Basic human decency, in other words.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I get upset. It seems like sometimes in society we're becoming even more divisive than we were, even when in the worst of Jim Crow. I mean, I'd go down to South Carolina, and even there were fountains I couldn't drink out of, etc. But people would smile at you and say hello. I mean, just sort of the basic decency, the civic things that brought us together. We need to get back involved in a lot more of those, in addition to making sure that the laws guarantee that everybody's treated equally.
Indeed. Ozzie, you talked about being part of the solution, and I want to hear from all of you in terms of the things that you're doing in the community. And Ozzie, I know you're involved in the Regeneration Center and the PGA REACH program. Tell us a little bit about the program and why you chose that particular direction to give back.
Well, I grew up in Southern California, an area called Watts. I call it South Central. And when I retired in 1996, there's a competitive void in your life after 19, 20 years of doing something. So I think that as athletes, we gravitate to golf because of the challenge. And it's one of the reasons that I chose it with PGA REACH, being the president. I realized that it gives kids another vehicle, another avenue with which, if they're exposed to it, if you expose them when they're young, they may find that thing that they're passionate about. And I realized that for most of us in the inner cities, it's about baseball, basketball, or football. I never thought about the game of golf when I was a kid growing up. And so when I retired and I started playing golf, I realized that this was a great vehicle for young kids. It teaches you discipline. It teaches you all of the core things that you need in life. And so my program is to not only introduce kids to the game of golf, but the business of golf as well. And so it's just another avenue by which we can expose these young kids, and maybe one or two of them will find their way. And so that's one of the reasons that I'm involved with PGA REACH. And now we've added another pillar, which is for our veterans who are shut in and guys. And for all of us that play a sport, it's all about that camaraderie. That's the one thing that when you retire, you miss the most. It's that camaraderie. And for veterans who have gone over and fought for this country, when they come back, they're not treated with the dignity that they should be treated with. And so I feel very important. I feel that it's very important to allow those guys to get out of the house again and experience what they're comfortable with, the people that they're comfortable with. And so golf is that one thing that they can all gather around and have fun with. And there's so many different things now that allow them, even without limbs, to still be able to play the game and enjoy the camaraderie that they did when they were in battle.
Renee, what about your foundation? Tell us more.
Yeah, my foundation, I talk a lot about positivity and optimism. Being 5'6" and playing basketball, you gotta have a lot of optimism about yourself. But really, I just think the way that you view things matters. Like I'm one of those people that believe that if you think you can, you can. If you think you can't, you can't. Like that, you're right either way. And so, with our basketball academy, you kind of talked about it, but there's certain skill sets that you learn in sports. You learn to be a team player. You learn problem solving at the highest level. You got 30 seconds, and in those 30-second timeouts, or even before a free throw, I could be at a free throw, and you see the huddles that the athletes do at the free throws. I'm a point guard, so I'm like, all right, listen, you got to get under the basket more, big fella. Hey, I'm gonna get you a shot in a second. Play some defense. What are you doing? And you have to just learn to function at a high level quickly and problem solve quickly. And there's a delivery part of it too, where I know that my big fella might not like me to be talking crazy to him, so I have to pump him up a little bit. But there's so many aspects that you learn in sports. But then there's also the off the court tangibles. And so we have the Renee Montgomery Foundation has a basketball academy where we teach you lessons on and off the court, because now your brand is a big deal. Before you could just be like, I'm a hooper and what I do is hoop and that's it. Well, that's not really the case anymore with the name, image, and likeness we see in college, where sometimes that's just as important. You can see players that are elevated, and it may not be their skill set, but they may have a huge following. They may have a great personality, and they may be able to hoop. I think of players like an Asia Wilson in the WNBA, where she's the best on both sides of it, on and off the court. She comes on the court, she's a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, she's an MVP, she's all the things, just won a championship. But then when you look at her do interviews, when you look at how she handles her brand, she has a book coming out. she's doing both, and that is the goal. You know, I'll get you both of the bags is what I would say. You know, there's a basketball bag that you can get, but that other bag is looking bigger now in name, image, and likeness world. So it's like, get the bags on both sides, and that's one of the things that, you know, just teaching the athletes, the game is changing. You know, like when I went to UConn, people always ask me all the time, like, man, how much money would you have made at UConn if y'all had NIL? And it's like, I don't know, but even as pros, we have NIL. You know, like, people don't understand that, like, you can still get those sponsorship deals. So it's delayed, but it's still here, you know, in a sense of players that played before NIL. But I think, you know, with our foundation, we also have a talent show where it's called the Jingle Jam, but it's just about kids just being able to display their talents. I think that they need a space. And when you think about the arts, the world of the arts, where do you perform if you're just someone that knows they have a hit song? Like, these kids, some of them already had songs on Spotify and Apple Music, and I'm like, wow. You know, just junior high schoolers already putting music out. So it's just giving kids, you know, the opportunity to be great.
Alex, what about your Let's Share Foundation?
Well, my Let's Share Foundation have a few tentacles. The number one thing is feeding homeless families, working with Family Promise, which is a national organization which I serve on the board, and helping families that are homeless find places to live for, whether it's a short while, and getting them in a permanent place. That's what we do. But, you know, the homeless problem in this country has grown so much, and you go to every city, not just this country, but you go to, I've been to Canada and different cities in Canada, and just the homeless people that you see out on the streets, trying to just make a little dent. But I think the most important part of that is finding the families, you know, because families, you're talking about kids and mothers that need a place to stay, and, you know, whether it's temporary until you can find a place. And all homeless people aren't people that are homeless because of drugs or alcohol. You know, a lot of them can't afford rent nowadays. It's so expensive to live in a place. They may be down on their luck. They may have, the landlord may not have understood and said, hey, I'm looking for my money too, so you've got to move out. I've got to get some people that can take care of my property. And just trying to form a partnership with different churches to house people in their churches when they're not using them. That's one part. And, you know, I also do basketball clinics in the summertime for kids that don't get the experience and I was one of those kids that I got the experience because I was an exceptional athlete, but a lot of kids, they don't get the opportunity to go to a basketball camp or a football camp in the summertime because they can't afford it. So, you know, going to the community businesses and doing partnerships with them and asking them to support your foundation so that you can get kids to summer camp. So that's part of it. And but I think the major part is just helping homeless families and getting them support.
Calvin, Ozzie spoke so eloquently of the comradeship of professional sports, or really sports at any level, and you've worked with athletes with drug and alcohol problems. What motivated you to do that?
Well, it's interesting. I retired after the 1981 season, and I played 12 years in the National Football League, 1 year in the late lamented World Football League, but I was in Hawaii, so it wasn't too bad. But after I retired, I went back to Washington from Cleveland, where I lived, where my family was. And about a month later, I got a call from Art Modell, the owner of the Cleveland Browns at the time, and wanted me to come. He wanted to talk to me. And my initial thought was he wanted me to play again, and the tank was empty. But anyway, I went up and visited with him and the coach, Sam Rutigliano. And they told me about a problem that the previous year's team had that I was aware of, but I wasn't aware of how bad the problem was. Now, you know, I'll preface that by saying that I played 12 years in the National Football League, and the only year that I had a losing record was my last year. In 1980, we were 11-5. In 1981, we were 5-11. And, you know, I think some members of that team were having too much fun as a result of the success of 1980. And I'd be in the locker room in my last year, and I'd hear guys talk about, blah, 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 and I knew guys were getting high, smoking weed, et cetera. But I thought boys will be boys, and they'll just evolve out of that. Well, it turns out we had a serious problem on that Cleveland Brown team. And they asked me, if I could help them, try to address this problem. I knew nothing at all about addiction. We got together. I got together with a guy named Paul Warfield, former an All-Pro Hall of Fame receiver for the Browns, and we decided to talk to a guy named Carl Eller, who had publicly announced that he had lost everything because of his addiction to drugs. We asked him, we said, well, surely when you were coming down, there were times when, you could see what was happening, times of sobriety. Why didn't you seek help? He says, well, where would a guy like me, who everybody knows, how could I seek help without it becoming front page news? And so we resolved to set up a program, and we did. That first year, we started a program. We hired a guy from the Cleveland Clinic, a psychologist, and we ended up sending 8 guys to treatment centers around the country. And when they came back after the treatment center, we established an in-house aftercare unit. Twice a week, they would meet, modeled on AA, and talk about, dealing with their addiction, becoming a recovering addict. I thought a treatment center was like a shot of penicillin. You get a shot of penicillin and you're cured. And that's when I realized how deadly and how bad the problem is for somebody who reaches that stage. And so we did that for 4 or 5 years. It ultimately evolved into other programs within the Cleveland Browns, career counseling, investment counseling. We had a section that dealt with family counseling, et cetera. It became a forerunner of player programs in the National Football League, and I think even in the NBA, helping young men deal with the responsibilities of being an athlete and how to take advantage of certain situations. But I remain very concerned about the problem of addiction. I ultimately went to the Orioles and ultimately to the Cowboys, but I became a member of the Rand Corporation Drug Advisory Board. And, I still fear, because I think it's a very silent problem right now in this country that's not being addressed like it was. And I've seen what it can do to families, to individuals.
Indeed. I wish this conversation could go on a lot longer. Unfortunately, our time is up for our program today. I would like to thank you, Ozzie, Calvin, Renee, Alex, for being here and for all that you have done for your communities and for people around the country. It has been absolutely amazing, and we are thrilled to have you here. We want to thank Dr. Russ Wigginton of the National Civil Rights Museum for his continued support of our celebration today. Coming up immediately after the symposium on Bally Sports Southeast, it's Grizzlies Live, presented by Ford and Mid-South Ford dealers with Brevin Knight, Rob Fisher, and Chris Vernon. And then at 5 o'clock, we'll tip off our game coverage, the Memphis Grizzlies taking on the Golden State Warriors. Again, thank you so much for having us. Thank you for watching the Earl Lloyd Sports Legacy Symposium here from the Built Ford Tough practice facility at FedEx Forum.
All right, thank you very much, Pete, and thank you very much to the honorees here today in the 19th Annual Sports Legacy Award here at FedEx Forum. Rob Fisher and Brevin Knight with you. It's always fascinating to hear some of these stories. I enjoyed hearing who their inspirations were, and Calvin Hill talking about Jackie Robinson was the guy that he ate the peanuts like Jackie Robinson did. Alex English, I thought his story about his grandma's influence was really cool to hear as well. So it was another fun afternoon for sure.
Yeah, for me it was a different dynamics. You had 3 guys who lived during Dr. King's time, and then Renee Montgomery, who because her parents were HBCU graduates, her mom being a 30-year professor at an HBCU, she was able to learn hearing Dr. King, his teachings, and so many other things through storytelling.
Yeah.
So you had three people who lived it, and they had the experiences. Calvin Hill talked about being and going from Baltimore, living in an all-black area, going down south to visit, having to drink out of the different water fountains. So to hear those stories of how it touched their lives, how it changed their lives for guys living through it, and then for a young lady who experienced it through someone else's eyes, but they all had an effect and a profound effect from Dr. King and his teachings. It was fantastic for me.
You were on the panel a couple of years ago.
Yes.
What was that experience like being on the other side?
For me, it was fun because it gave us a different medium for me.
Right.
And so for so long, we're just talking about sports and that way. But this gave me an opportunity to talk about my feelings on social justice and where things are today. How do I think things could be better? And so to hear other people who lived through it, here with their ideas or things that they thought were most important at this time, it was fun. And like I said, I enjoyed the opportunity. I was a sit-in.
Right.
Whenever they need another sit-in, I'm ready to sit in again. Because there's some more things that I would like to say, but yeah, no, just to be able to have people see you in a different light, and I think that's what it was tonight, to see those gentlemen and young lady in a different light than what we're accustomed to seeing.
Yeah, I mean, Renee Montgomery, my goodness, she looks so young, and it's amazing how much she's accomplished in her career. She was fascinating to listen to as well. It's a 22nd annual Martin Luther King Jr. Day celebration game, and you've been watching the 19th annual Sports Legacy Award and the Earl Lloyd Sports Legacy Symposium. Coming up next will be Grizzlies Live. We'll get you set for the Grizzlies and the Golden State Warriors, which is going on here this afternoon at FedEx Forum. We'll get you set with that. Chris Vernon will join us as well. That comes your way next here on Bally Sports Southeast. Keep it right here. We'll be back after this timeout.